I knew the chair wasn't for me the moment I saw it folding metal too low for the table, tucked near the end where the light from the chandelier faded. No name card. No cushion. A placeholder, not a place. I set down the glass dish with the sweet potatoes, the one with the faded blue floral rim. I didn't mention that the lid had cracked last year right down the center. I'd repaired it with clear epoxy and the kind of patience that comes after 70 birthdays. No one noticed. The kitchen island was already full. Truffle mac and cheese, cranberry brie tartlets, something labeled heritage turkey from a catering box with gold foil trim. Andrew glanced up from the bar cart. "Oh, you're early." I smiled, just the corners of my mouth. Traffic was kind. He didn't offer to take the dish, just turned back to pouring bourbon into cut glass tumblers, measuring more carefully than he ever did with money. Catherine appeared moments later. Lips glossed her sweater the color of dry champagne. "Everything's handled, Evelyn. Just enjoy today." She gestured vaguely toward the living room, where unfamiliar faces laughed too loudly at someone's joke. I nodded and moved to the sideboard, adjusting the pie dish, as if that might anchor it. It didn't. Emily darted past me, hair bouncing, a glitter pen clutched in her hand. She stopped just long enough to lift her face to mine. "Grandma, I wrote a poem for school. Want to read it later?" I touched her shoulder. "I'd like that." She was pulled away before I could say more. Someone called her name, not me. Another room, another tone, another world. Dinner was late. No one mentioned it, but the wine flowed. Catherine's friends spoke in half-finished sentences full of travel plans and real estate terms. At some point, I noticed the sweet potatoes had been served in ceramic ramekins, separate from the rest, as if unsure where they belonged. The seat I took creaked every time I shifted. It was angled slightly away from the table. A man across from me offered me the salt, and then immediately began speaking to the woman beside him about golf. I held the shaker a moment longer than necessary before setting it down. When the meal ended, plates were cleared by someone I didn't recognize. The room smelled of citrus cleaner and cinnamon candles. I stood to retrieve my coat, still draped over a dining chair near the back hallway. But Andrew stopped me, one hand full of aluminum-wrapped containers. He held one out to me. "You don't have to cook anymore, Mom. This is enough for you." It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel on the surface. The room didn't quiet in response. But something inside me did. I took the foil-wrapped plate. It was warm, damp, against my palm. I looked down at it, mashed potatoes already smearing the inside of the lid. A paper napkin sat crumpled under the plastic fork. No one met my eyes. Not Catherine, who was complimenting someone's earrings. Not Emily, who was now curled beside a woman I didn't know, laughing at a story I couldn't hear. Andrew had already turned away. I stood there for a moment, long enough to see my reflection in the dark glass of the French doors. Cardigan, too thin for November shoes, just a little worn at the heels, mouth set in a line that used to smile more easily. I told myself I'd forgotten something and moved toward Catherine's office to delay walking to the car. The room was dim. A mug with dried lipstick sat on a coaster shaped like a palm leaf. On the desk, papers were fanned out beneath a home decor magazine. My coat was where I'd left it weeks ago, draped neatly over the back of the leather chair. I reached for it, but paused. One sheet of paper near the edge caught my eye. My name, typed in bold. Below it, a string of numbers. I pulled the document free, careful not to disturb the rest. A loan agreement. Garrison Family Holdings. Line of credit, $87,000. Co-signed by Evelyn Garrison. The signature was mine. Slightly slanted ink smudged at the tail of the N, and I always forget to lift the pen fully. The notary seal was embossed, raised against the page like a scar. I didn't remember signing it. There had been papers Andrew brought by in spring, something about updating insurance, and another stack last year before tax season. He always smiled, reassured me, just housekeeping stuff. I had signed without reading. That much I couldn't deny. I stared at the document until the lines blurred. My coat slipped from my hand and fell softly to the floor. I didn't pick it up. In the background, laughter rose and broke again, like a wave hitting tile. Catherine's voice rang out clear, bright, practiced. Emily clapped at something. Ice clinked in a glass. The world moved untouched. I held the paper like a photograph of someone I'd once trusted, and then folded it not neatly, just once an uneven crease down the middle, and slipped it inside my purse. Outside, the air had cooled. The porch light was still off. I didn't ask them to turn it on. I stood at the bottom step, the container still in my hand. The bottom had begun to sag, moisture seeping into the foil. I considered setting it down. On the railing, maybe. Leaving it behind. But I didn't. I carried it to the car, buckled it into the passenger seat. I didn't drive off right away. I looked through the windshield at the house lights glowing from every window, a home I helped fund, decorate, repair, a place where my name no longer lived in the rooms. When I finally turned the key, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't hum. I just sat in silence with a plate of food meant to replace presents and a piece of paper that told the truth more plainly than any family photograph. And when I pulled away, I didn't look back. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood what it meant to not be expected. It was never about being needed. I didn't need a role or a title. I only wanted to be allowed to stay near the edges quietly. After Ray passed, I folded his shirts and placed them in boxes no one asked for. I kept two, one blue plaid, one linen with frayed cuffs, and pressed them between lavender sheets in the back of my dresser. That first winter, I warmed my hands with the coffee mug he used every morning. The crack near the handle caught my thumb. It still does. Andrew moved into the role of provider too quickly. The funeral was barely over when he brought up a business idea. Something about consultancy with scalable outreach. I didn't understand it, not really. But I nodded and I opened the retirement account we'd built together. It's short term, he said, not looking up from his laptop. Just a bridge until my first contracts lock in. I remember I wore the navy sweater with the missing button that day. The one Ray used to tease me about said I looked like I ran a boarding school. I kept it on through the meeting at the bank. The teller addressed everything to Andrew. I only signed. Later, when the balance changed on the online statement, I didn't mention it. Instead, I baked banana bread and dropped it at Andrew's doorstep. Catherine once came by with a paper bag and a tight smile. Just a small favor, Evelyn. I need these textbooks for the nursing prep course. I'll pay you back next week, promise. I slipped the envelope into her purse without checking the amount. Weeks passed. No textbooks arrived, but I saw a photo on social media, her and two friends standing outside a storefront holding tiny cupcakes with gold leaf and champagne flutes. Spa opening. Our dream begins, the caption read. I clicked the heart icon anyway. The next Christmas, Catherine hosted. She decorated with pale silver and eucalyptus, folded the napkins into birds. Everything was tasteful, expensive, correct. When the guests had gathered around the tree, she raised a glass and thanked her parents, her husband Emily, and everyone who supported this family through thick and thin. I lifted mine and smiled at the stem. Andrew brought over a folder a few months after that. Said it was just year-end stuff. Taxes, filings, the usual. His tone was brisk. Practiced like a manager running late to a meeting. I sat at the kitchen table and signed where he pointed. He kissed the top of my head on the way out. My teacup had left a faint circle on the papers just beside my name. Once, when Emily was starting school, I offered to move closer. I thought it would help with the drop-offs, the after-school pickups, the busy days, when Catherine said things were overwhelming. Catherine didn't look up from her phone. She's at an age where she needs boundaries, Evelyn. Too much proximity can be confusing for kids. I folded the brochure I'd brought about the retirement villas near their neighborhood. It's still in my desk drawer, creased, never opened again. I hosted Sunday dinners for a time, even when they started arriving late, or not at all. I'd set the table with the chipped stoneware, the ones with blue rims. Ray always liked those, said they reminded him of old diners on the highway. I made roast chicken, the kind Andrew used to ask for in college. But no one asked anymore. They'd eat quietly, scrolling their phones and leave dishes in the sink. I didn't mind the cleanup. I liked the sound of running water. One afternoon, Andrew called while I was weeding the front garden. His voice was cheerful, too cheerful. "Can you co-sign something real quick? It's just a lease renewal for the office space. No risk, totally standard." I wiped the dirt from my hands with a towel and told him to bring it by. He arrived in a rush, wearing a blazer that still had the retail tag inside the sleeve. I didn't mention it. The pen he gave me had a gold clip with his company logo. "It's nothing serious," he repeated, tapping the line where my name was typed in bold. "Just makes the bank happy." I signed. The paper was thick with a slight sheen. I remember that more clearly than the terms. I brought Emily a book once, an illustrated volume of fairy tales with gold edging and ribbon bookmarks. I thought she'd love the drawings. When she unwrapped it, Catherine glanced over and said, "Oh, we're trying to avoid stories with outdated gender roles. Maybe a STEM book next time." I placed it on the shelf behind a row of picture frames. It's probably still there. Unopened, its spine too stiff to bend. Over time, I began answering texts with one-word replies. "Sure." "Okay." "Yes." I avoided emojis. Catherine once sent me a thumbs up with no context. I reread it 5 times, trying to find tone in the shape of a cartoon hand. Emily grew taller. I stopped buying her clothes because I was told, "She has her own style now." I gave her a scarf I'd knitted anyway. She wore it once, long enough for me to see it in a photo at a fall festival. They don't remember that I used to sleep in the chair beside her crib when she had croup. I used to hum Moon River into the folds of her blanket until her breath calmed. They don't remember that I once drove 6 hours to bring Andrew a spare suit when his luggage was lost on the way to a job interview. The suit didn't fit. He laughed, said it made him look like someone's grandfather. I left it on the hotel bed and didn't stay for dinner. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just kept showing up like a porch light no one bothered to turn off. And when Catherine introduced me at a school event as Andrew's mother, with a half smile and a nod toward the seats in the back, I adjusted my coat and sat down without a word. The hem of that coat is frayed now. I wear it anyway. There's still a peppermint candy in the pocket from Emily, wrapped in tissue, flattened and forgotten. Maybe that's what I became. Something wrapped in politeness, pressed thin between expectations. Still there, still sweet, but no longer asked for. It always starts with the smallest things, the kinds of details no one writes down. No one remembers except the person who carries them. The Christmas cards were taped to the banister with glittered clothespins. Emily had made one for each classmate and a few extras for family. Hers had snowmen wearing scarves and little sticker gems for eyes. Mine was tucked in near the bottom. It had no name on the front, just Happy Holidays in thick marker, and inside a single candy cane taped at the fold. The others had drawings, messages, hearts, or at least initials. I told myself it was an oversight. I propped it on my kitchen windowsill anyway, next to the ceramic salt shaker shaped like a robin. For my 65th birthday, they dropped off a small wrapped box 2 days late. Inside was a cactus the size of a coffee mug. No card, no note, not even a tag from the store. Catherine said it was low maintenance, perfect for your place. I kept it on the counter for a while. It leaned toward the window no matter how I turned it. Eventually it shriveled from too much sun or too little water. I didn't replace it. There was a ceremony at Emily's school once. She was being honored for a statewide essay contest, something about kindness and character. I arrived early and took a seat in the second row. Catherine stood near the stage with Andrew, both dressed like they were going to a real estate closing. When the principal announced her name, they stepped forward proudly. Cameras flashed. "This is her mother," Andrew told the woman next to him, smiling wide. The reason Emily turned out so well. He didn't glance toward the audience. I folded my hands over my purse and watched my granddaughter take her certificate with both hands. The applause was polite, brief. No one noticed me stand up when it ended. I waited until the crowd cleared before leaving. A few weeks later, I stopped by their house to drop off a pan of cinnamon rolls. Catherine was redecorating. There was a new photo arrangement in the hallway, family portraits in black and white frames. One large canvas in the center caught my eye. It was recent. The three of them standing in a field, arms-linked, sun setting behind their heads. The tones were golden, magazine perfect. "You like it?" Catherine glanced over her shoulder. "We had it done for the neighborhood calendar. Just us this time makes it cleaner visually." She straightened one of the smaller frames. "You've got plenty of photos with Emily at your place, right?" I nodded. I didn't mention that the last framed picture of all four of us was from a birthday party when Emily still wore braids. The frame had a chip on one corner. I'd turned that side to the wall. When Ray was alive, there were Saturday pancakes, car washes in the driveway, messy drawers full of stickers and spare change. We'd talk about vacations we never took, read the newspaper out loud, argue over who used the last of the good butter. Andrew used to sit on the floor with Emily and sort puzzle pieces by color. I kept the corner piece with the missing tab in a drawer just in case they ever finished it. They didn't. Now, when I walk into their house, everything is arranged and quiet. Candles that have never been lit, throw pillows that no one leans on, a stainless steel kettle on the stove that no longer whistles. At Thanksgiving last year, I brought a cranberry loaf. No one touched it. It sat beside the store-bought desserts, untouched, until Catherine quietly slipped it into the trash the next morning. I saw it still wrapped, perched above the coffee grounds. She didn't know I noticed. "Store ones just hold better," she said when I lingered in the kitchen. "They cut cleaner." I let her hand me a pastry from the box and thanked her. The loaf at home grew mold by the third day. I didn't throw it out until I had to. I used to keep a weekly calendar of Emily's events. Soccer games, spelling bees, library days. I stopped asking for the schedule after Catherine sent me a group email with updated routines, for reference only. My name was the last on the list after the nanny. I used to bring little gifts when I visited pens with glitter ink, hair ties, notebooks. One day, Emily handed them back before I left. "Mom says we're decluttering," she said. "Less stuff, more space." I put them in my purse without comment. One of the notebooks is still in my drawer untouched. The cover says "Shine" quietly. I left a voicemail on Andrew's phone once. I asked if he wanted to have lunch, just the two of us. No special occasion, no holiday, no Emily. He never called back. At the next gathering, he mentioned work had been insane. "Can't even think straight these days," he said. "Barely have time to breathe." He poured himself another drink. No one asked what I'd been up to. I keep receipts for things I no longer need. Not out of habit, but because the dates remind me I was once part of their lives in small, tangible ways. A box of pencils for Emily. A set of baking trays for Catherine. a tool set Andrew said he couldn't afford during tax season. I labeled each with a Sharpie just in case. The marker faded. The trays never came back. I looked through my photo albums not long ago. The pages curled at the edges, stickers peeling, captions written in Ray's handwriting crooked and too large. Andrew's first day, tie too big. Emily's blanket fort, age 4. No new pictures have been added in years. The last photo I printed was one I took myself. Emily sitting in my backyard cross-legged watching ants carry crumbs from a dropped cookie. The grass was too long. Her socks were mismatched. I liked that one best. They never asked for a copy. I don't expect grand gestures. I don't wait for invitations. But there is a kind of silence that grows heavy, not from shouting, but from being passed over. I've become the person they pan to briefly in videos, the one in the background, a smile too faint to register, a shadow that stays still while the others move. And when I speak, it's as though my voice passes through a wall of glass, visible but muffled. There's nothing cruel about it, nothing sharp or loud, just a steady fade, one frame at a time. Some betrayals are too polite to raise their voice. I had never learned the language of digital banking. The app always looked foreign to me, soft blues and green icons, numbers arranged like puzzles I wasn't meant to solve. Ray had once called it the future in your pocket. Mine stayed mostly closed. But I opened it the morning after Thanksgiving. Not out of suspicion, out of restlessness. Something about the way the foil had buckled on the plate, how the mashed potatoes clung to the underside of the lid, made my fingers twitch, for a reason to justify the silence in that house. The numbers didn't match the ledger I kept in the top drawer of my desk. I traced the last 3 withdrawals, $8,000, $10,500, $7,200, none labeled. No merchant names, just initials and transaction IDs. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. Then I called Martha. She didn't ask questions. She just brought over her reading glasses, a yellow legal pad, and 2 muffins I couldn't eat. We sat in the back room with the curtains drawn. I handed her my check register and slid the phone across the table. There's a pattern, she said, pencil tapping lightly on the pad. Every few months like clockwork. But these don't go to tuition or medical expenses. They're routed through a secondary clearing account. Looks like they're pulled into something labeled GLC. The letters meant nothing to me. I shrugged. She didn't. Garrison Legacy Capital, she whispered. It's an investment firm, and your name is on it. I didn't speak. She pulled up a public record search, showed me a PDF company registration, 3 years old. 2 names listed, Andrew Garrison and Evelyn Garrison. A single signature scrawled beside mine. Mine was neat, careful. His looked rushed. The notary seal was familiar. I had seen it before, embossed on a stack of tax forms Andrew brought me 2 years ago. They've pulled over 200,000, Martha said. Most of it moved into private crypto wallets. Untraceable. My hands were still. I watched a speck of dust float in a beam of light near the bookshelf. On the armrest beside me, a loose thread from my cardigan curled like a question mark. Do you remember signing for any of this? I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I just looked at the pencil in her hand. It was the kind Ray used to chew at the end when balancing our books. Martha kept going. She was gentle but persistent. There's more, she said. A charge recurring. $100 monthly. It's listed under your supplemental credit line. She turned the screen. The address read Seaside, Grand Villa, Unit 4B. Luxury condo, she added. Rental agreement lists Catherine Garrison as the resident. Leaseholder Evelyn Garrison. I remembered the name. Not from a bank statement, but from a video somewhere buried in the external hard drive Ray had set up for family events. I plugged it in later that evening. The clip opened on Catherine in my kitchen. She wore a soft gray blouse. Her hair was pinned back. "This is just a formality," she said, handing me a clipboard. "Insurance stuff, lease riders and renewal confirmations. You don't need to read it. Just sign at the bottom." Her tone was light, reassuring. She smiled when I hesitated, touched my arm gently. "We just need a second name to keep the rate. It's all temporary." I signed. The pen dragged slightly across the page. I wiped a smudge from the corner when she took it back. The video ended there. I closed the laptop and folded my hands in my lap. My wedding ring pressed against the side of my finger. I hadn't worn it in months. It still left a pale mark on my skin. I didn't call Andrew. I didn't text Catherine. I didn't march into anyone's office. I sat in silence and let the words echo. She needs her own space to think. "You've got plenty of pictures, don't you? We're trying to avoid clutter." "Don't worry, Mom. It's just business." They had said those things like they were instructions for folding laundry. I remembered Catherine's voice from the video. Polite. Measured. "You don't need to read it." I remembered the smell of cinnamon from that Thanksgiving. Not from my dish, but from a candle shaped like a pine cone. I had smiled and complimented it. "Store-bought," she had replied. "They just last longer." There were no arguments, no slammed doors, just a long hallway of doors gently closing behind me one by one. I looked at the ledger again. The columns no longer lined up. I took the loose thread from my sweater and wrapped it around my finger until it left an indentation. They hadn't taken everything. Not yet. But they had taken enough that I could finally see what I'd been standing in for years. Not family, not mother, not grandmother, just a signature. And even that borrowed. I stopped wearing the wedding band the day after I changed the passwords. It left a faint, unbroken circle on my skin, like a shadow that had grown too quiet to follow me. I didn't put it in the usual dish on the dresser. I placed it in the back of the drawer behind an old pair of gloves I hadn't worn since Ray's funeral. There was no announcement, no confrontation. Just a morning when I sat with a piece of toast going soft beside me and logged into every account that still carried my name. I removed Catherine's access from the health savings card. I closed the joint, checking Andrew had added me to, for simplicity, he'd once told me, while I signed the form with his pen. Simplicity had become expensive. The lawyer, Mr. Dwyer, didn't ask why I wanted to revise everything. He adjusted his glasses and handed me a pen. "You still want the trust for the granddaughter just for tuition. Not living expenses. Not discretionary spending. Tuition only." He nodded. "You'll be the only authorized party, yes." I remembered the way Emily once held a library book against her chest, like it was something warm. I hadn't seen her do that in a while, but that wasn't her fault. I made the transfer quietly, $60,000. Enough for 6 years of private schooling, or 4 years if Catherine tried to stretch it with extras. But she wouldn't be able to touch it. No names except mine on the account. I made sure of that. That afternoon, I shredded the old printed copies of our estate plan, the ones with Andrew's name on everything. Healthcare proxy, executor, durable power of attorney. The paper jammed once. I cleared it without thinking, wiping my hands on the same apron I used when Emily was little, and we baked sugar cookies shaped like stars. She always made one with 3 raisins and called it Papa's Smile. I kept that apron, not because it was useful now, but because the pocket still held a small, hardened raisin. I left my cell phone in a drawer for the rest of the day. No one called. I think I preferred it that way. 2 days later, I went to the post office and rented a new P.O. box under just my name. No more mail to the house. I didn't tell them I didn't leave a forwarding address. I let the silence gather weight. Catherine texted that night, "Did you happen to reorder Emily's supplements? She's been low for weeks." I read it twice. Then once more. Not a word about Thanksgiving. Not a question about the account I'd just closed. I didn't respond. The next day, Andrew sent a short email. Got a weird notice about the Seaside Villa card. Said it was declined. Everything okay on your end, I replied, only with a screenshot of the final transaction summary. His name didn't appear once. I didn't add a note. At dusk, I took down the family photo that hung near the coat rack. It had been there since the year Emily turned 10. She had braces in the photo, smiling beside her parents. I stood in the back, slightly out of focus, holding the corner of a tray of cupcakes. I don't think anyone noticed me then either. I wrapped the photo in newspaper and slid it into a storage bin. That night, I slept without turning on the white noise machine I usually used. The quiet was unfamiliar, but it didn't scratch anymore. The next morning, I folded the blue sweater Andrew gave me last Christmas, the one with the tag still on. "Figured you'd like something simple," he had said. I placed it in the donation pile along with the candle from Catherine, labeled Tranquility, and a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Mom." I didn't cry. I didn't call Martha, even though I knew she would say something like, "Finally." I just made tea and watched it steep until the water turned the same color as the bruise near my rib cage from a fall weeks earlier that I never mentioned. The bruise had faded. Before the end of the week, I changed my emergency contact to Mr. Dwyer. At the pharmacy, the technician raised an eyebrow when she saw the form. No family, none available. She didn't ask more. On Friday, I stood at the back of my closet and pulled down the tote labeled Important. Inside were tax documents. Ray's old retirement letters and a sealed envelope labeled for Evelyn. In case you forget who you are. I hadn't opened it in 10 years. I still didn't. I just placed it in a new folder one with no name. At the very bottom of the tote was a small box of stationery. I hadn't used it since Emily's birth announcement. I took out a single card. On it, I wrote slowly, "To Emily, this trust is yours. No one else's. Use it wisely. I believe you still remember the stars. No signature, no return address, just a stamp and her school's mailing address." I placed it in the mailbox just before the carrier arrived, then stood there as the box closed with a soft metal click. No storm, no shouting, just a woman in a quiet house making her exit in pieces. They wouldn't even notice until something didn't work. And when they did, it would already be done. Sometimes silence isn't empty. Sometimes it holds shape like a room rearranged, so the light finally lands where it should. The cottage is smaller than my old living room. The floors creak even when I don't move and the windows don't quite shut tight against the sea air. But I sleep better here. I think it's the way the breeze passes through uninvited, but never unwelcome. I stopped closing the curtains. Mornings don't start with the hum of someone else's television or the clink of dishes in a sink I wasn't done with. They begin with waves tapping the shore like a clock without numbers. The first thing I unpacked was the kettle. Not a fancy one, just the old dented one with the chipped black handle I brought from Ohio. I boil water slowly now. No rushing to pour before someone says, "We're out of time." I drink Earl Grey in a mug that doesn't have a quote about motherhood on it. Just a plain mug chipped on one side. That's enough. No one has asked me to wire money this week. No one left forms on the kitchen counter or told me it was just routine. I haven't had to explain myself or apologize for misunderstanding something they meant clearly for themselves. I went to the Sarasota Public Library and left with a card in my own name. I signed up for a class at the community center teaching basic budgeting for older women. They asked what my background was. Enough mistakes to share, I told them. There were 5 women in the first session. One brought her granddaughter. Another took notes with a pink pen and wiped her eyes when I mentioned compound interest. I asked them each to write down one thing they never wanted to ask out loud again. The woman with the pink pen wrote, "Can I afford to say no?" I didn't say much after that. Just listened as they filled the space. Some days I catch myself standing at the window with my hands still, as if holding something I forgot to let go of. I once held Emily like that, when she had a fever limp and warm her breath, shallow her hands curled in sleep. I remember Catherine taking a photo from the doorway. I never saw the picture printed. The mail comes around 10. Most days it's catalogs. Yesterday there was a card from Martha, a drawing of a pelican on the front. Inside, no one claps when you save yourself. Do it anyway. I pinned it beside the kitchen light switch. I haven't told Andrew where I am. I don't expect him to ask. The last time we spoke, his voice was level sharp, without needing to be raised. "You act like you're some helpless old woman," he'd said. "But you've always controlled the guilt. You weaponized it." I didn't argue. I looked at the collar of his shirt. It was wrinkled at the back, like he'd put it on in a hurry. He didn't hug me when I left the porch. I don't know if he noticed the ring was gone. Sometimes when I water the plants by the porch, I think about Emily. She would have loved the way the lizards scurry across the railings here. The wind is soft and the sand is pale like flour. I wrote a letter to her 2 nights ago, just a few lines. I didn't send it. If one day you ask why I left, this is the truth. Love is not the same as permission. I folded it in half, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the drawer next to the salt. Not hidden, just waiting. The address line is blank. I want it to reach her, but only if she wants to find it. At the market, the woman selling oranges asked if I lived nearby. I said yes before I realized it was true. She handed me an extra tangerine. "You look like someone who needs a small sweetness." I placed it on the windowsill when I got home, watched the light shift over it all afternoon. I've stopped measuring days by who calls. I let the phone ring once last week. I didn't recognize the number. I let it pass. I wear a light cardigan most mornings. It used to be Ray's. The elbows are worn through and it smells faintly of cedar. I don't wear it because I miss him. I wear it because it fits the quiet here. I haven't decorated much. Just a shell from the beach, a small painting of a door left open, and the receipt for my first Florida grocery run pinned to the fridge. I didn't buy anything for anyone else. That was new. Some nights the loneliness hovers, but not like it did before. It isn't cold, just quiet. I used to think stillness was something to be filled. Now I let it speak. It tells me things I wasn't allowed to hear when I lived surrounded by voices that never stopped long enough to ask. There is a freedom in not being expected, in not being summoned when the printer breaks or when a babysitter cancels. No one has referred to me as just staying with us for a bit in weeks. I found a list Andrew made once in a drawer back home. It had my name next to 3 items: grocery card, emergency contact, Sunday pickup. I never showed him that I saw it. Here, I'm not a list. I'm not a task to check off. I'm not a resource. I'm not a bother. I'm not a guilt. I am a woman with her own spoon, her own tea, her own mailbox. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't need permission to exhale. Some knocks aren't requests to come in. They're declarations of war. I hadn't boiled the water yet. The kettle sat heavy and still on the stove, the faint smell of lemon balm from the open jar trailing in the air. The knock came again 3 times fast, hard enough that the frame trembled. I knew the rhythm. I didn't speak as I opened the door. Andrew's face was flushed, the envelope in his hand bent and damp from the grip. His tie was crooked. A smear of something dark clung to the cuff of his sleeve. "What the hell is this?" He waved the letter like it was an insult he could shake off. I said nothing. I looked at the edge of his collar, frayed just slightly. He'd worn this shirt too many times without noticing it needed replacing. "You're cutting your own family off like some cold-blooded snake." The words landed thick. I folded my hands together. They didn't tremble. I'd learned how to keep them still a long time ago. "You raised me to believe you'd always back me, that no matter what you'd—" He stopped, then pointed a finger at the envelope. "You'd never do something like this. Now you're just an old woman with a grudge." He paced. I let the screen door creak closed behind me. He didn't sit, though the chair behind him scraped against the floor slightly as he brushed past it. "You think this is justice? Some kind of payback? You owe me. Everything I built, everything your name was on it. You can't just disappear and play victim." He leaned in the way people do when they think volume can rewrite the past. "You're not a mother. You're a traitor in pearls." I didn't wear pearls. I haven't in years. But that wasn't the point. He waited. I didn't offer him a chair. I didn't offer him tea. "I've spent 3 decades protecting this family," he went on. "Shielding you, including you. I gave you space when Dad died. I let you live with us, and this is how you repay me." "Let." The word thudded like a stone in a shallow bowl. "You ungrateful." He stopped himself, but only barely. "You think this Emily Trust Fund makes you a hero? That locking everything up after 18 protects her from me? You're poisoning her against us. Us, not me, not him. Us, as if there was still a whole, intact family somewhere in this room." He pulled out his phone and waved it once, screen still lit with unread messages. "You reverse this," he muttered. "You call the lawyer, you fix this, or you never see her again. She's my daughter, not yours. She won't even remember you in 5 years. His voice didn't rise on that last part. It dropped. Quiet, flat, like truth or punishment. I felt it in the floorboards before I saw it, a quiet shift in weight, a breath being held at the edge of the hallway. "Emily." She stepped forward. Just a few feet. Long enough for her shadow to land across the tile and stop at my toes. He turned, startled. She hadn't spoken. Her backpack was slung over one shoulder, hair in a loose braid, shoes still laced tight like she hadn't meant to stay long. She didn't say a word. Just stood there still like a statue that had just blinked. He looked between us. The silence stretched. "You don't understand," he muttered toward her. "She's trying to divide us." Emily blinked once, then looked at me. I didn't move. I didn't try to soften what he'd said or chase it away with a look. I let it rest where it landed. "She's not your mother," he added. "You owe her nothing." There it was again, the math of it. What was owed, what was earned. Always a ledger, never a relationship. Emily shifted her weight, stepped slowly across the rug, and came to my side. She didn't touch me. Not yet. But I felt her standing there taller than I remembered, more solid somehow. Andrew exhaled a short, bitter sound. "You'll regret this." He turned without waiting for a reply, the door flinging open too wide, then slamming back against its frame. I didn't reach for Emily. I just stood. She took a breath. Then her hand, smaller than I remembered, slid into mine. I hadn't worn my wedding ring in months, but her fingers still curved around where it used to sit. We didn't speak. There was nothing to explain. The kettle hadn't boiled, the water still cool. The house still smelled faintly of lemon balm and sea salt. Emily didn't ask about the trust, or the letter, or the name he'd called me. She just stood there beside me, quiet and upright, like a door gently left ajar, not open, not closed. I didn't cry. I only gripped her hand the way one holds a railing after too many stairs, steady, wordless, necessary. And in that moment, I knew silence wasn't weakness. It was the only language he never learned to understand. Some mornings feel like a sentence that finally ends in a period instead of a question mark. I laid out 2 slices of toast on the chipped saucer I'd found at a thrift store. No butter, just the ridges of a knife dragging across jam from a half-used jar. The sunlight came in soft through the mesh of the screen door, and I didn't feel the need to chase it with words. They stopped writing 2 weeks ago. At first, it was calls, then texts, then silence wrapped in missed calls and forwarded voicemails. I didn't answer any of it. I let each attempt pile like unopened mail in a box meant for things that no longer require response. The trust is still untouched. So is the envelope with the deed I had redrafted, tucked neatly beside the binder labeled Estate Revised. The tabs are color-coded now. That used to overwhelm me. It doesn't anymore. I'm not lonely. The word doesn't match the shape of these days. Every Tuesday morning at 10:15, chairs fill the back room of the Sarasota Community Center. Metal chairs that squeak when someone leans back too far. Most of the women are older than I am, a few younger. One still wears her ex-husband's name like it might rot if she ever tried to say it out loud. We talk about bank statements and power of attorney and how trust is both a financial term and a bruised thing you sometimes have to reclaim like an ID someone tried to use without your permission. I keep a small dish of hard candies at the front, not because anyone asks for it, because small comforts matter. Last week, a woman with silver-dyed hair and a jacket stitched with sunflowers paused before leaving and asked me quietly, "Did you ever forgive the one who made you lose everything?" I looked at the way her hands clutched her canvas tote like it held something fragile. Maybe receipts, maybe just pride. I lost money. Not everything I said, I still have myself. She blinked once and didn't ask more. That was enough. Catherine's name appeared twice in my email inbox last month. The subject line read, "Just hoping you'll hear me out." I didn't click. There was no need. Intentions don't change just because they start using softer fonts. I heard through the attorney that she's dealing with the rental fraud allegations. Something about a forged lease payments rerouted a subpoena. I didn't ask for more details. That version of life, the one filled with cold dinners and colder smiles, it's behind glass now. I observe it, but I don't return to it. I still wear the same robe in the mornings, faded blue with the thread coming loose around the collar. Ray once stitched a tear near the pocket when we were both too tired to care about appearances. I haven't fixed it since. That tear keeps me grounded. Some things don't need mending if they remind you of who you were when you were still learning. My coffee mug is chipped at the lip. I drink from it anyway. Emily called last Sunday. The screen lit up with a number I didn't know, but the voice on the other end was hers. I used Jenna's phone. She said it was okay. I just nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Her voice came through with a whisper-soft static. "She wants to visit." Emily murmured. "Mom, I mean. She said maybe in the summer, that we could come see you if that's okay." I let the silence stretch, not to punish, just to listen to the edges of her words. She's different now, she added. Not a lot, but a little. I didn't make promises. I didn't say yes or no. I told her the tide always comes back, but you don't stand on the same sand twice. She didn't laugh, she just said, "Okay, I'll tell her that." I think about that moment sometimes, how a girl with her father's mouth and my eyes found her way to me through borrowed signals. There's a rusted key that sits on my desk now. It doesn't unlock anything anymore, not since I changed the locks, but I keep it anyway. A reminder that some doors are meant to stay closed. Not locked out of fear, but kept shut out of choice. I don't pace anymore when the mail arrives. I don't scan for his handwriting or watch for unfamiliar return addresses. I sort them calmly. Bills, circulars, the occasional invitation to donate to some cause I already quietly support. Peace doesn't come loudly. It's not a choir. It's a ceiling fan humming in the middle of the night, and toast browned just right, and the sound of your own name said kindly in your own head. They haven't changed. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but I have. I'm no longer the woman waiting at a hallway's edge hoping to be asked back in. I'm the woman on the porch with the chipped cup and the silent phone who knows that being whole isn't something you request from others. You become it when you no longer give permission for anyone else to dismantle you. And I don't. Some things lose their shape when you stop calling them by name. The box in the trunk had been taped twice. Once with the usual clear strip that dust clings to, and then again with a layer of blue painter's tape like someone halfway believed it might need opening again. I didn't. Inside a brass frame with a faded photo of Ray in his Sunday shirt, the one with the collar he hated. A set of silverware we never used, but cleaned every Thanksgiving. One button from his favorite flannel sewn on too tightly by a woman who hadn't yet learned to loosen her grip on the past. I dropped them off at the antique dealer just after lunch. No receipt, just a nod, and his gloved hands lifting the box as if it were heavier than it was. Maybe it was. The cottage in Sarasota never felt like a hiding place. It became something else, a blank space I could write myself into. But the house in Georgia, that house carried echoes too loud to leave unaddressed. It needed a close that wasn't just metaphor. I walked through it one last time. The floors had more creaks than I remembered. The hallway seemed narrower, though I hadn't grown any wider. The kitchen clock still ticked 2 minutes behind stubborn in its rhythm. There, in the second drawer under the sink, I found the small envelope marked in Ray's handwriting. The ink was lighter now, like it too had grown tired of being held. Inside were the details of the insurance policy we never used, the emergency numbers we never called. I folded it once more and left it on the counter. I didn't take anything that could whisper old arguments back to me. No quilts, no casserole pans with chips along the rim. I kept one thing, a small brass key with no known lock. Ray used to joke it was for whatever you don't want anyone else to open. The lawyer's office was silent, except for the shuffle of pages. Samuel didn't look up when I handed him the letter. He didn't need to. He had read the draft weeks ago. I want it sealed, I told him. No appeals, no revisions. Let it stand. He nodded. You're certain I wouldn't be here if I weren't? He slid the document into a folder marked in thick red, irrevocable. No ceremony, no gavel. Just the slow scrape of legal binding closing like a book, with no final chapter left to write. I changed my name that same afternoon. The form asked for a reason. I wrote restoration, not revenge, not erasure, just the act of returning something to its rightful form. I held the new license like a stranger's photograph. Evelyn Whitaker. It tasted unfamiliar then, slowly. Intact. At the old house, I returned one last time to remove the nameplate. Garrison in brass letters slightly crooked on the mailbox Ray installed himself. I unscrewed each bolt with a precision I hadn't felt in years. The metal was warm in my hand, heavier than expected. I wrapped it in brown paper, taped it gently, and penned a note. Return to sender. The woman at the post office didn't blink when I handed it over. She placed it in the bin without a second glance, as if things like that came through every day. Maybe they do. Andrew hadn't tried again. Not since Emily's brief call. No letters, no visits. Not even silence worth measuring. A vacancy where outrage used to live. Catherine did write once more. A longer email with words like misunderstood regret and family deserves a second look. I didn't reply. I had seen enough of her second looks. None of them reached me. The hardest part wasn't the letting go. It was knowing how long I'd held on to things that never held me back. I stood in the hallway before leaving for good. My shadow fell differently on the floor now, not longer or shorter, just steadier. I didn't cry. I didn't walk slowly to draw it out. I locked the door behind me, turned the key once, and placed it in the realtor's hand like it had never been mine to keep. It rained that afternoon, light like static against the windshield. I let the wipers rest. I passed the church where we renewed our vows the year Ray turned 60. The steeple looked smaller now. The bench outside was empty. No one waved. That felt right. I didn't stop for coffee. I didn't take the old route back. I let the road curve in new ways and didn't mind when I missed the turn. Not every return has to be perfect. Some just have to be over. There's a photograph I didn't take with me. Andrew at 10, holding a baseball glove too big for his hand, smiling like the world hadn't yet taught him cruelty wrapped in entitlement. I left it in the attic. Not as a punishment. Just a fact some faces don't belong in frames anymore. Back in Sarasota, I printed a new set of address labels. Whitaker. I placed one on the inside cover of my checkbook. Another on the back of the mailbox slot. A small act. A declaration. I am not unfinished. I am not waiting. The door didn't slam. It didn't click. It closed without sound and stayed closed. Some things are no longer mine to fix. The mint leaves snapped easily between my fingers. I rinsed them without rush, laid them beside the kettle, and watched the steam catch in the morning light. The old mug with a chip near the handle still fit just right in my hands. I never did get around to replacing it. Maybe because it never asked to be replaced. Emily's book rustled behind me as she shifted in the hammock. Pages turned like breath, steady, deliberate, alive. She hadn't spoken yet, and I hadn't asked what she was reading. 3 weeks ago, a letter arrived, thick envelope, bold serif print, and the sharp smell of ink that hadn't quite dried. Samuel Dwyer's office. I didn't open it right away. I boiled water first, then let it cool. When I finally did, the words were simple enough. Due to the ongoing investigation into Garrison Legacy Capital and associated fraudulent accounts, the court has frozen all assets and ordered liquidation to satisfy outstanding debts. Mr. Andrew Garrison is currently residing in a private address, not in state custody. Martha Reynolds called the next evening. He's not in jail, she said, voice low, like she was still deciding if that disappointed her. But he's answering to people who won't excuse him the way you did for years. I didn't answer. I only placed the mug down and wiped the table twice, even though it wasn't dirty. Catherine sent a letter too. No return address. I understand now what I let happen, it said. I hope someday Emily will forgive me fully. The paper was torn along one edge. Not cut. Torn. I imagined her sitting at some kitchen table not her own, writing those lines slowly, then folding them, once, twice, hands shaking in a way she might not have allowed before. Emily didn't ask about the letter. She saw it, left it where it was. Now she was here living with me for the summer. We walked each morning along the shore, picked shells that weren't too broken, avoided the ones with jagged edges. She baked almond cookies on Sundays and left the broken ones for me, saying, "These taste better anyway." I didn't argue. At the community center, the teen finance class had grown 8 girls, 2 boys, and Emily beside me, keeping attendance, arranging chairs, correcting my math on the board when I rounded too generously. She didn't call it teaching. She called it hanging out. But she showed up on time every Saturday and told her friends they should too. Yesterday, a girl named Sadie asked me, "Do you think people who steal from family feel bad?" I looked at her and said, "Some do, some don't. But guilt isn't proof of love." She nodded like she'd already known that, just wanted to hear it out loud. Later that day, Emily found me folding laundry. The sheet wouldn't crease evenly. I tried 3 times before leaving it half folded across the couch. She sat beside me without speaking, fingers tucked under her knees. Then softly, "If he apologizes one day, would you forgive him?" I pressed the towel down onto the table, lined the corners, like it mattered. My mouth didn't move right away. "Forgiveness isn't something I owe," I said. "It's something I protect. I forgive what doesn't try to break me again." She didn't respond, not right away. Then after a breath, "Then I think I forgive him too. But I don't forget." The sheet stayed wrinkled. I didn't try again. Last week we found my old ring, the sapphire one, Ray gave me on our 30th anniversary. It had been sitting in a drawer behind expired tea bags and a photo of a place we never visited. I handed it to Emily without ceremony. "Don't wear it because it's pretty," I said. "Wear it if it reminds you to choose what sees you." She slipped it on her ring finger. It was too big. We laughed. Then she moved it to the 4th finger on her right hand, and it stayed. No one talks about what it means to live quietly, without defense, without parade. There is no audience for mornings like this. No recognition. Just a kettle that boils a hammock that sways, and a girl who reads aloud sometimes when she thinks I'm not listening. Andrew hasn't called. He might never. I don't keep a photograph of him out anymore. Not because I'm erasing him. Just because the frame was too heavy for the shelf. I haven't written another letter. Not to lawyers, not to old friends, not even to myself. The last one I wrote sits in the drawer beside the kettle labeled "Only for Emily." I think she knows it's there. I don't think she'll open it unless she has to. Some days I sit on the porch and watch the wind move the trees without touching them. That's what survival feels like. Not a grand motion. Just breath without force. Roots that stay hidden but hold. There are no more bank accounts in someone else's name. No voices shouting down the hall. No waiting for someone to need me to sign something real quick. Now there's just tea. And almond cookies that crumble when they shouldn't. And a girl who hums while tying her shoes unaware. She's singing the same song I once sang when Ray was still here. She looked over this morning and said, "You're smiling. Are you thinking of something funny?" I didn't answer right away. I only handed her the chipped mug and said no. Just something true. I don't need proof anymore. I just need the space to stay visible. And someone who sees me without asking why I'm still here.